Thank you for your recent purchase of the Boonedox KT. Before watching this video, please be sure to read through all provided instructions to prepare for the build. Before you begin assembling the trailer, you're going to need a few tools. It will also help you in the assembly process if you have wheel chocks and something like a bucket or chair available to use as a rest or prop. The assembly of the KT trailer should be done on a flat level surface for your safety. It is best to use at least 2 people during the assembly process. Prior to starting the assembly process, remove all contents from the 3 boxes that the KT trailer arrived in and ensure all parts and components are accounted for by cross-referencing them with the parts and component sheet provided. If any parts are missing, do not proceed any further with the assembly process, and contact Boonedox immediately to ensure the correct parts are sent to you. Step 1 is the axle assembly. Remove the axle from the box and lay on the floor. The mounting plate on the axle will be facing up and the arms of the axle will be pointed back. Now remove the lug nuts from the lugs and keep in a safe location. Put the wheels provided onto the axle hub. Put the lug nuts onto each lug, ensuring the tapered end of the lug nut goes on first. Hand tighten the lug nuts until the wheel is sitting flush against the hub. Using the lug wrench, tighten the lugs to a snug fit. Using the torque wrench, tighten each lug to 90 foot-pounds. Do not tighten each lug sequentially in a circle. Tighten one and then skip the next one until all 5 are tightened to the proper torque. This will ensure that the wheel seats properly onto the hub. Now it is time to do the frame assembly. Take one of the side tubes with the side that has 6 holes in it up. Align the 2 center holes up with the holes on the axle spacer. Take 2 of the 1/2 inch by 13 by 10 inch galvanized bolts. Put one of the 1/2 inch galvanized washers on it. Insert each one of the bolts through the top of the side tube and through the axle spacer as shown. Place the axle spacer on top of the mounting plate on the axle with the bolts going through the holes on the axle mounting plate. Attach using one 1/2 inch galvanized washer, one 1/2 inch galvanized lock washer, and one 1/2 inch galvanized nut on each bolt. Notice the axle spacer will not be centered on the side tube. The longer side of the side tube will be towards the front of the trailer. Hand tighten this only, as you will need to allow the parts to move on each other at this point. Now repeat this process for the other side. Remember again that the axle spacer will not be centered on the side tube. The longer part of the side tube will be towards the front of the KT. Take one of the short cross tubes and attach it to the front of the side tube. The short cross tube has larger holes on one side versus the other. The larger holes will face up. Insert the 3/8 by 16 by 3 inch galvanized bolt through the larger hole and into the smaller hole on the other side. Then put the bolt through the hole on the top of the side tube, inserting it all the way through the side tube. Attach the short cross tube to the side tube using one 3/8 galvanized washer and one 3/8 galvanized lock washer and one 3/8 nut in each hole. Hand tighten only. Repeat this process, attaching the other end of the short cross tube to the other side tube. Now repeat this process to attach the rear or second short cross tube, attaching it to the back of the side tube. This will form the main frame of the KT. Now you will need your large framing square to square the frame. One good way to help assist to tell if the frame is square, the axle spacer will be running parallel with the axle mounting plate. Once the frame is square, go back and tighten all the bolts using your sockets and wrench. This is a very important step. Don't proceed until you have squared the frame in order to ensure that the trailer pulls true. Just as a reminder, you will be tightening a total of 8 connections at this time. 2 where each of the axle spacers connects to the axle on each side, 2 connecting the short cross tube to the front of the side tubes, and 2 connecting the other short cross tube to the rear of the side tubes. Now there will be 2 open holes remaining on the top of each side tube on each side of the KT. These are where you will attach the long cross tubes. Using one 3/8 by 16 by 3 inch galvanized bolt on each side, attach the long cross tube to the side tube. The large holes on the long cross tube will be facing up for this application. Once you have the bolts through the holes, use one 3/8 galvanized washer, one 3/8 galvanized lock washer, and one galvanized nut. Tighten each side. Repeat this step for the other long cross tube. Your KT should now look like this. Now you will pre-assemble the tongue of the KT. To start, lay the center tube on the floor with the side that has 3 holes up. Next, put one of the 4 foot tubes on each side of the center tube. The holes on the side of the center tube will line up with the holes on the side of the 4 foot tube. Using the 2 3/8 by 16 by 7 inch galvanized bolts, put one 3/8 galvanized washer onto each bolt. Insert the bolts through the 2 holes on the side of the 4 foot tube, pushing it all the way through all 3 tubes. Then put one 3/8 galvanized washer and one 3/8 galvanized lock washer, and finish by putting one 3/8 galvanized nut onto each bolt and tighten. Lay the tongue tube onto the frame. When doing so, put it down so the VIN number is on the side and in an upright position as if you were going to read it. You should position the tongue tube so it is between the 2 holes. Place the 3 assembled parts from steps 1 and 2 centered onto the tongue tube. Using the 3 3/8 by 16 by 5 inch galvanized bolts, put one 3/8 galvanized washer onto each of the 3 bolts. Then insert each bolt through the center tube and into the tongue tube. Secure the tongue tube to the center tube using one 3/8 galvanized washer, one 3/8 galvanized lock washer, and one galvanized nut on each of the 3 bolts and tighten. Before moving on, go back and make sure all connection points are secured from all prior steps. With the tongue assembly on the bucket, lift the front of the frame assembly over the tongue assembly. The back of the tongue assembly will line up with the 2 holes in the center of the front long cross tube. Using 4 of the 3/8 by 16 by 3 inch galvanized bolt, insert each bolt through the long cross tube and the short cross tube into the tongue assembly. Secure the tongue assembly to the long cross tube and the short cross tube. Using a 3/8 galvanized washer, 3/8 galvanized lock washer, and 3/8 galvanized nut on each bolt and tighten. Put the coupler onto the front of the tongue tube. Take the 1/2 inch by 13 by 3 inch galvanized bolt and insert it through the coupler going through the tongue tube. Secure this with one 1/2 inch galvanized lock washer and one 1/2 inch galvanized nut and tighten. Take the 1/2 inch by 13 by 4 inch galvanized bolt and put one 1/2 inch galvanized washer on it. Then take one of the safety chains and put the pre-made loop onto the bolt under the washer. Then take the bolt and insert it through the coupler in the first hole through the tongue. This is the one closest to the front. Then on the opposite side, put the other safety chain onto the bolt, followed by a 1/2 inch galvanized washer and a 1/2 inch galvanized lock washer, finishing with a 1/2 inch galvanized nut, and then tighten. Attach the tongue support to the bottom of the tongue tube. One side of the tongue support has a tip coming off of it. The other side has a hole drilled in the flat part of the metal. Insert the tip into the pre-drilled hole that is under the VIN number area of the tongue tube. Secure the front of the tongue support by using the 3/8 by 16 by 3/4 inch galvanized bolt, followed by a 3/8 galvanized lock washer. The hole through the tongue tube is tapped, so you will screw the bolt straight to the frame without using a nut. Now it's time for the fender assembly. You will need 2 of the fender supports, 2 of the 3/8 by 16 by 2.5 inch galvanized carriage bolts, 2 3/8 inch galvanized lock washers, and 2 3/8 inch galvanized nuts for each side. Put one of the fender supports into the rectangle formed in each side of the fender with the large holes down. These large holes will be on the half of the fender support that is not under the fender. Insert the 2 carriage bolts through the holes in the fender through the fender support. Secure these using 1 3/8 inch galvanized lock washer and 1 3/8 galvanized nut on each bolt and tighten. Repeat this process for the other side. Attaching the fender assembly to the frame can be tricky and is best done with 2 people. You will need 2 of the U-bolts and lock washers and 5/16 inch nuts to go on each post of the U-bolt. Center the fender over the tire and the fender supports, going under the side tube. Put the U-bolt over the side tube and through the fender support. The U-bolt will not go all the way through the fender support. It is recessed inside it. Secure the U-bolt using 1 lock washer and 1 nut. It may be easier if you have one person hold the fender level, put the nut down inside the 1/2 inch socket, and put the washer on top of the socket. Be careful because the washer will just be balanced on the socket. Insert this up through the large hole and onto the U-bolt. Tighten until you first start to feel resistance. Then move to the other side of the U-bolt and repeat this process. If you tighten one side snug before you put the other side on the fender assembly, it will not sit level. Now repeat this entire process for the other side. Now it's time to attach the light support angle. This will attach to the rear of the side tube using 1 U-bolt, a lock washer, and a 5/16 nut on each stud of the U-bolt. The back of the light support angle will go just to the rear of the hole in the side of the side tube. Now repeat this process for the other side. Now that you have the KT assembled, it's time to run the wiring for the trailer lights. It is very helpful to have something that is rigid yet somewhat flexible, about 8 feet long, to assist the running the wires through the tube. In this video, we will be using a tape measure. Push the tape measure all the way through the tongue tube, starting from the back. Once you have the tape measure through, tape the end of the wires onto the tape measure and pull back through the tongue tube. Continue pulling the wiring aid and wires through until you are left with about 18 to 24 inches sticking out the front of the tongue tube. Take the yellow and brown wires and pull it to the left side of the trailer. Take the green and brown wire and put it on the right side of the trailer. The sides are determined by looking to the front of the trailer from the back. Starting on either side, insert the end of the wire into the hole on the side of the side tube. You will want the wire to come out of the end of the side tube closest to the hole you just put the wire into. Pull all the wire out of the front of the side tube. Be sure to leave enough slack so you can zip tie the wire to the short cross tube later. Push the tape measure all the way through the side tube from the rear. Tape the wires onto the tape measure and pull the wires back through the side tube. Once you have all the wire out of the end of the side tube, take the end of the wire and put it through the hole on the outside of the side tube towards the light support angle. Take the black wire loom and start inserting the wire where it comes out of the back of the tongue tube. Once you have about 12 inches of the wire into the wire loom, slide the wire loom about 2 inches into the tongue tube, so the wire is protected coming out of the end of the tongue tube. Take one of the zip ties and tighten the wire loom with the wire inside of it tight to the short cross tube, only on the side that comes out of the tongue tube. Continue to push the wire into the wire loom all the way up to the hole where the wire goes into the side tube. Pull the wire loom up tight to the short cross tube and zip tie it tight in this location. Once you have this location tight, you will want to cut the wire loom about 2 inches past the point where the wire goes into the side tube. Pinch the wire loom so one side of it folds into the other, making it a smaller circle, and push this into the hole in the side of the side tube. This will protect the wire inside the side tube. Now repeat this process for the other side. Each tail light will have a specific side of the trailer it will go on. Be sure to get the correct light for the side you are working on at that point. Put the tail light onto the light support angle and tighten only one bolt, hand tight, using the lock washer and nut. Take the white wire from the tail light and put it over the stud from the tail light on the back side that does not have a nut on it yet. After you put the wire onto the stud, put the lock washer and nut. Take the wires that you pulled through the side tube and hold them up against the wires coming out from behind the tail light at the top of the light support angle. You will want about 2 inches of overlap, and cut the wires that you pulled out on the side tube. Pull the 2 wires apart in the center. You might need to make a small cut to get it started, but once it starts, they are easy to pull apart. Using the wire strippers, strip about a 1/2 inch of insulation off each end. Depending on what side you are working on, your wires will go together as green to green and brown to brown, or yellow to yellow and brown to brown. Put one of the wire ends that you stripped into the connector. Make sure the wire goes into the small hole in the connector and push it in until the insulation is against the wall of the hole. Using the crimpers, crimp the side of the connector that the wire is in tightly. Repeat for the other wire. You should not be able to pull the wires out of the connector at all. If the wire moves, you do not have it crimped tight enough. Use electrical tape or liquid electrical tape over these connections to help secure the connections and make waterproof. Take the wire loom and insert the wires coming out of the side tube into the wire loom. Once you have about half the wires pushed into the wire loom past the connectors, push the wire loom together and push it into the hole in the side of the side tube to protect these wires. Continue to push the wires into the wire loom until you are to the point where the wires go behind the tail light. You will want to cut the wire loom about 1 inch past this point and push the wires into it to protect the wires from this light support angle. You can now tighten the nuts on the tail light. Push as much slack as you can into the side tube to minimize snagging. Now repeat this entire process for the other light. At the front of the tongue of the trailer, attach the ground wire for the lights to the tongue support tube. The ground wire is the white wire. Use the 5/16 18 by 1 inch stainless steel bolt and washer to make this connection. Remember, the hole is tapped, so you will not need a nut. Using the remainder of the wire loom, start at the end of the wires where the plug is. Push all the wires into the wire loom. The wire loom will need to cover the wires going into the tongue tube, at least 2 inches. The white ground wire will need to come out of the wire loom at some point. Add a zip tie around the wire loom at that spot to keep it in place. The last thing you will need to do is put the strap stops onto the end of the long cross tubes and insert the end caps onto all the tube ends. Using one of the 3/8 by 16 by 1.5 inch galvanized hex bolts, put one of the strap catches onto the bolt. Insert the bolt into the hole on the bottom of the long cross tube and secure using the 3/8 galvanized lock washer and 1 galvanized nut and tighten. Repeat this step on each of the long cross tubes. Using the 2-inch square rib caps, insert them into the end of each piece of 2-inch square tubing. You will not put the caps into the end of the tongue tube or the tongue assembly parts on the inside of the trailer. You may want to use a hammer and lightly tap them in. Using the four 1.5-inch square caps, insert these into the ends of the fender assemblies. Your KT is now fully assembled. Please make sure that all connections are tightened properly. The tires are inflated to the proper PSI and the lug nuts are torqued to the proper setting before using the KT trailer. And remember, it's always a good idea to check all these connections, including retorquing the lug nuts after about 25 to 50 miles to ensure they are properly secured. We at Boonedox appreciate your business and hope you enjoy your new KT.